Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Talk with J&J. I'm Josh Purnell, and this is my wife.
My name is Jasmine Purnell.
And we're so excited to welcome you to our podcast today, where we have real conversations about real life. Today, we're going to be focusing on the topic of love languages.
Yeah, and before we dive into that, I just want to go ahead and give you a story that maybe you can relate to. This happened in college. So I met a friend, right? We weren't friends yet, but I met a person. Her name was Reese. It's not her real name, but her name was Reese. And we instantly clicked. We had the same backgrounds. We grew up with the same cultures and everything. We loved the same music. We had all the same interests, right? So I'm a big touch person. Like, I love touch. That's my number one love language. So no matter who you are, if I don't know you, I'm going to hug you. And now I know not to do that with everyone because some people are not comfortable with it. But before, I was so oblivious to that. I would think that people would like the same thing that I did. So I would always go up to people, hug them, do everything like that. But I realized with my friend Reese that she didn't receive love the same way that I did, that I was always a big touch person. So like I said, like we will always hang out. My hand is always like on your arm, or like if we're sitting down, my pinky's like touching your leg, or just something like that. Like I'm always touching, and it's never like in a weird sensual way. It's just like, it's a comforting way for me at least. And I know that my friend Reese, she would act awkwardly like once I would be doing that. And I finally got the sense of like, oh, maybe she doesn't like that.
Maybe she's not into this.
And so I asked her, I was like, hey, like I know every time we hang out, like you still feel weird. Like you don't give me good hugs. Like you do the little taps on that. And I was like, I feel like we're good friends enough that we shouldn't be having the little tap hugs. And she's like, you know what? I never really grew up doing that. Like I give hugs to my mom and my dad, my brother, sister, but not with other people. And it's not to say like you're weird or anything. It's just like, I'm not used to it. And I don't really care for that. And so that was really eye-opening for me, because it made me realize just because I receive love a certain way doesn't mean each person that I interact with receives love my way. And so that was good for me to open my eyes. And when I encountered other people, I really looked at like, okay, what do they like? Do they like touch, or do they want to stay away from that? Do they like quality time? And with that story, let's go ahead and like, what are the 5 love languages?
Yeah. So today what we're going to do is we're going to dive into what the 5 love languages are, how we can both give and receive those, and then how we can be aware of what other people's are when we're trying to communicate with them. I think both of us have had a lot of opportunities in our life where we've encountered these situations. And I wasn't always aware of what the 5 love languages are or what I was doing necessarily. But even getting married, I have a different love language than Jazz, and I receive love a different way. And I also give love a different way than she does. And it's very important that, we're all able to show the 5 love languages. And it's very important that we're intentional about recognizing what ours are so we can communicate how we would like to be loved, but also recognizing what others are so we can make sure that we're addressing theirs.
Let's break it down. The 5 love languages are 5 different styles of expressing and receiving love. Not everyone expresses love the same way, and not everyone likes to receive love in the same way either. So let's go ahead and give off the 5 love languages. 1, words of affirmation. 2, quality time. 3, acts of service. 4, gifts. And 5, physical touch.
Yeah, and let's jump into the first one, words of affirmation, and kind of give a little bit more of a definition here. But people whose love language is words of affirmation, they like verbal expressions of affection.
I think this is perfect that you're going over this, because this is his number 1 love language. And it's like something that I didn't grow up with, or something that it wasn't my number 1. I would say in college or in high school, that was my last on my list. But getting married to someone who that's his number 1, it actually went to number 2 on my list.
And I think the thing about words of affirmation is people just think that you want to hear good things about yourself, but it's not necessarily that. It's just that you want to be verbally, and this could be phone call, this could be in person, this could be even a text, honestly,
On a note.
on a note, something that's written out that is a expression of, hey, I notice you, hey, I love you, hey, this is something cool that I've seen, or it's just a way that is easy for me to receive love. But it's also a way that I give love. I am very complimentary. I want to tell you, hey, I noticed this about you. Hey, I'm so proud of you here. Hey, this is what I see. And again, early on, this wasn't necessarily one of Jasmine's love languages. And so when I would compliment her, she'd be like, oh, thanks. And it was, for me, I was like, well, okay, are you going to say anything nice? Like, hey, why don't you ever say anything nice to me? Or different things like that. But it's like understanding why I'm communicating, or understanding what I need to be communicated, is super important. But it's also really important that I understand what hers was.
And it's funny that he says that, like, that wasn't mine. And he would always compliment me. And in my head was like, did I tell him that he needs to compliment me 24/7? Like, what is going on? And
stop with the compliments, bro.
And I remember this one specific thing that he would always say, Jasmine, you smell so good. And I'm thinking, I'm like, well, goodness, was the last person you date, did they smell? Or like, what is going on? And it was just so funny because I finally told him. He's like, no, like, I don't know, like, you do always smell good, so I just wanted to compliment you and like let you know that you do, like, you smell good.
That's something that I notice about you. That's something I love. It's great.
I don't know. And then I realized of like, oh no, he's not just saying these things just to say them or to impress me. Like, he's really noticing these things and he wants me to acknowledge those things about myself. And once I switched perspective of like, oh yeah, he's just not saying these things, like, it really changed of like, okay, I actually really like these words. And it's something that, like I said, it's not just words. It's like words of encouragement, words of love, words of affirmation.
I think it's sometimes if we're not used to it, if that's not one of our love languages, sometimes hearing compliments, it's almost like someone's trying to flatter us, or someone's trying to like get something out of you. Like, why are you being so complimentary? But it's like understanding if that's someone's love languages, that's how their expression of love to you is going to be. They want to compliment you. They want to say those things. And we have to learn, if that's not our love language, how to receive that with grace, and how to really give them that affirmation back if that's one of theirs.
Yeah. And the next one is quality time. And people who have this as their love language, they flourish when you have the one-on-one time with them.
Intentional conversations.
Yeah. And not only just a one-on-one time, but like Joshua said, that you're intentional, like your phone's not in the way. You're not focused on other things. Like, you were literally just intentional and focused on that person and making sure you are having that quality time, whether if it is just sitting down and basking in silence together, or if it's having conversations that you haven't had in a while,
or playing a game together, or something where you guys are spending time,
going out to eat.
Yeah, that's making memories for the two of you. That's building a connection. That's deepening the intimacy that you have with that person, because you're having a time that is intentional with them. I think, again, and as we go through these love languages, I don't know that I've met someone that doesn't at some level want to receive or hasn't liked one of these love languages. I just think as an order, like, some of them are more important to you than others. So I think most of us crave that quality time, especially with people that we care about. We want time where we're able to be there and have intentional conversations and deepen the connection that we have with them, to understand how they're thinking, to express our hopes and dreams, to talk about our vision and stuff like that. That's really important to have that time. But like Jess said, sometimes it's just like, you just need someone when you're sad to sit with you and be with you and to give you a hug and just say, hey, you know what, it's going to be okay. Or just even sit in silence. Sometimes that's what you need, but it's that quality time of like, hey, I'm there with you. We're going through this together. We're going to spend some quality time, or in good time, it's like, hey, we're going to go make awesome memories together. We're going to go do something that both of us, it's going to have a lasting impression on our life.
And another funny thing, I like to give stories about us because it's like something that we can relate to, or I don't know. It's just like I know our first road trip together, me growing up, like in a lot of road trips, like we don't talk, right? We're listening to music, we're having fun. And it's not like, oh, I don't want to have a conversation with the person inside of me. It's like, hey, we're just together. We're having fun. We're listening to our favorite songs. And our first road trip together, like, he didn't have any music on. And I was like, why aren't we listening to music? And I was like, I literally had 30 minutes of silence. And he I said, Jazz, like, is there something wrong? Did I do something? Like, why aren't you talking to me? And I was confused of like, did I do something like to make him think that I'm mad at him? And it was my silence that that made him think that. And I had to explain, like, Joshua, like being with you on this, like in this car ride, being quiet doesn't mean that I don't want to be here with you, or I'm upset with you because I'm not speaking. Like I'm content with just being silent with your physical presence right here with me. Like I'm content with that. And like, I don't need to say anything to make, I didn't feel like I need to say anything.
Like my background, sometimes I was like, if we're not talking, something's wrong. But for her, it was like, I just love that we're on this road trip. We're seeing this open pasture together and I'm just happy. And that was a super quality time moment for her. But I almost made it into an issue because I'm like, okay, she's silent. What is going on here? And that's where I want to stress. It's important to communicate your love languages, communicate what you're feeling in these moments. Like I'm a very open book. I'm like, Jazz, is something wrong? And she's like, no, Josh, like this is just, I love just sitting here with you. And that honestly was so good for me to hear. Like now, whenever we go on road trips, sometimes we'll sit in silence. I'm like, okay, she's just enjoying herself. She's having a good time over here. Sometimes we will have great conversations. Sometimes we'll be jamming out to all of our favorite hits from the early 2000s or like you never know what it's going to be because we've built that over time. But it's really important that you communicate what is that going to look like for you, because that other person needs to know so they can be prepared for that, and you also need to be prepared for how they need to receive love.
The next one is acts of service. So whoever has this as their love language, they appreciate when someone goes out of their way to make their life simple. Whether if it's like simple things of like, okay, if you're a married couple, if someone goes out of the way to wash the dishes without the other person asking, or if they're cleaning the house without the other person asking, folding clothes.
Also, full disclosure, guys, that is a great thing for your wife. If they go crazy when you clean the house, do dishes, do laundry, and then they're just like, wow, I love you. Like, this is amazing. Like,
whoa, you made up the bed without me asking.
Little things that like I don't necessarily love to do all the time, but like I notice that she really loves when I make the bed. She really loves when I will do laundry one day, or if I do the dishes, or if I just clean the house. Like those things like that. Hey, hot tip, write it down, take it into your marriage, see how it works out.
But all of these love language, they coincide with each other. Like, okay, let's say like my thing is I love acts of service. I love when he does things like I don't even have to ask him to do. It's just like, wow, you notice this. And like, that's going to make me happy. But not only is he giving me love, like as soon as he does that, I acknowledge that he did that without me asking. So I give him his words of affirmation of like, wow, like thank you so much. You didn't have to do this, but you went out of your way to make sure that I didn't have to do this later.
And it's almost like you don't want it to be in a patronizing way. It's almost like, I don't want like a sarcastic, oh, thank you so much for doing things like that. But it's like, sometimes you're like, hey, Josh, I know you cleaned the house today. I really appreciate that. And that's something that's so small, or something that seems small, but like, I didn't necessarily do it for that reason. I did it because I wanted her to know that I love her and that I want to get this clean. But then she also noticed that I was doing that. And it just creates this huge circle of love that is so much fun to be a part of. And like, again, like acts of service, like it's so important that if that's someone's love language, like doing small things for them, getting them coffee in the morning, because that makes their life easier before they have to leave for work. Maybe helping organize something for them, asking to help them with the project they're working on. If Jazz is doing a garden project and she needs help, like an acts of service thing would be like, hey, I'm going to help you with that, rather than just playing Xbox while you're doing your garden and we're doing our own thing. It's like taking time out of the way to get those things done.
With people who have acts of service of their love language, actions speak louder than words. And not necessarily saying that they don't like words of affirmation, but your actions are going to speak louder.
It's
and
huge.
Like, give more life to them than your words will.
Yeah. So first three we had where we started off with words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service. And the fourth love language that we're going to talk about today is gifts. And, honestly, I grew up in I like gifts. I like giving gifts, but it wasn't as a priority in my life growing up as it was in Jasmine's family. They just love giving gifts. Like, guys, when I tell you, they'll give gifts because it's Tuesday and it was sunny. Like, I'm like, what the heck is happening? Like, what is going on here?
Literally every holiday that you can think of, we're going to give
President's Day, I'm probably gonna get a gift tomorrow, and I'm like, what am I getting a gift for?
Shout out mom and dad. Woo.
Yeah, it's President's Day. No, but like for me, I was like, what the heck? Why are we giving gifts all the time? But what I really learned is that's one of the ways that Jasmine and her family, they show love. Like they're very intentional about the gifts that they give. They want you to know, hey, I thought about you and I got you something to show that I'm thinking about you.
And with this, guys, it doesn't mean that you have to give the most expensive gift or the most extravagant gift. Like if it's something thoughtful, I will say, I think one of my I have lots of favorite gifts that Josh has given me.
Yeah, she has a lot of favorites. She doesn't understand the term favorites. Everything's her favorite. But
one of my favorite gifts that he first gave me as my first Christmas present, as when we first started dating, it was a bracelet, a very thoughtful, meaningful bracelet from Pandora with a
charm,
little, like 2 charms.
I was all about the charms.
It started off like my first Christmas in Boston. He gave me a little snowflake and I'm like, oh, that was super sweet. And it's something that I always remember. And not only did he get that, he like gave different boxes of like things that I would like. And he was very, very intentional with each gift. And each gift had like a purpose and a meaning for our lives together. And that was one of my favorite gifts ever, because I was like, I don't think anyone's ever been that intentional with giving me a gift.
Yeah. And gifts, what do? They make people feel appreciated. They make you feel valued. It lets you know that other person thought about you enough to take time out of the day to go get you a gift, to make you a gift, to write you a card, or do something that was out of the norm and to give that to you. I think like Jazz said, it's not always, it's about the price. It's never really about the price. It's about how intentional are you about that gift. Some of the coolest gifts I've ever gotten don't cost that much, but it's something that is an inside joke. It's something that lets me know that person listens to what I say. Yeah. I'm very, Jazz says I give good gifts, not to hype myself or anything like that, but it's really not that hard, because I will listen throughout the year. And when she says like, oh, I really like this, I will make a note of it. Again, write things down.
And I'm very intentional of letting him know what I want.
Yeah. But like, I write it down so I don't forget. But like, she'll send it to me on Instagram. I'll get like 20 messages. She'll be like, and I'll notice a common theme. I'm like, oh, wait a second. Or like, one thing I also do, like pro tip, look at their Pinterest board, because there's a lot of stuff on there that I wouldn't necessarily think about, and she wouldn't know that I even think about. Maybe she's told me about it, maybe she hasn't, but I'm like, oh, this is something that she seems to like. Here's a theme. So when I'm out shopping, when I'm out looking for something and I notice something that's consistent with that theme, I'm like, wait a second, I bet Jazz would love this, because I'm going to get, this is something that she seems to like. And then when I give her those gifts, she's like, oh my gosh, where did you find this? And I'm like, hey, I got you. And the same thing for me. She's very good about like, I'm not a hard person to buy gifts for. I don't think. Maybe I am. She can ask her. But like, she always gets me exactly what I want. Like, and it's like it'll be whether it's the shirt that I want, whether it's the jersey that I want, whether it's tickets. I don't know how she does it. I mean, I guess I'm pretty good at like communicating what I want as well. But she just always gets me the right gift, and it means so much to me. I'm not even a huge gifts person, but like when Jazz gets me a gift, or when someone gets me a gift that's super thoughtful, it means so much to me.
Going on with that, I want to shout out my little sister, Gabby. Like, ever since she was little, she would always like, I'm not going to cry.
She might cry.
She would always like give like a little note or draw a picture or something like that. Whoa. And that was so like, it was super simple, and she was little, but she always did that. And till this day, she will do that. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's super, super thoughtful.
It means so much. It lets you know that you're valued by that person, because they took their time and effort to give you something.
Yeah.
So like where we said, we start off with words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, and gifts. And the final love language that we're going to talk about today is physical touch, which was
my
the topic of Jasmine's story at the beginning. But why don't you take this one? why don't you go into this one?
So, okay, I'm gonna give you like a background of why I love it. I grew up in a Hispanic culture. I feel like all Hispanics, like, they greet each other with a hug and a kiss on their cheek, everything like that. So everything is very, very physical touch. We don't really do handshakes. It's like very formal. We do that sometimes, but it's more of like, oh, I don't care who you are. I'm going to give you a hug, and I'm going to let you know that you're welcome. Mm-hmm. You are welcome in my family. You are welcome in my house. You are welcome. And it's something that I loved growing up, something that I thrived on. Like, when someone gave me a hug, I'm like, wow, that it feels nice. It warms you up. But someone who does love touch as a love language, it makes a person feel loved when they receive physical expressions of your love.
If you're in a romantic relationship, that could look like whether it's a
Holding
kiss,
hands, kissing,
holding hands,
cuddling on the sofa.
Yeah. And I think one thing is physical touch isn't always about essential nature. I think Jazz touched on this earlier. Is sometimes it's just like sometimes she just wants to grab my arm, or sometimes she just wants to give me a quick hug. And it's just like, hey, and this is also for her family and stuff like that. I just want to let you know that I sense your presence and I want to make sure I give you a hug, or I want to let you know you're there. But this also is important for intimacy when you are in a relationship of like, hey, like we're going to be intimate. Like that's super big about being intentional about how I touch you, when I touch you, that I'm not only touching you when I want to have sex, that I'm also touching you in, you know, when we're walking down the street and I hold your hand, or when I give you a hug in the morning or something like that. Like, it's very important that you are intentional about, you know, your physical touch.
Yeah. And ladies, it's okay to tell your partner, to tell your husband that having physical touch doesn't mean that it always has to be in an intimate way. I know that's something I was so scared of to tell Josh before. Like, hey, just because this is my number one love language doesn't mean that I crave intimacy 24/7. And it's okay to feel that way. It's more of like, hey, I want you to hold my hand, or hey, we're by the couch. I want to be by you. Like, I want to be stuck like glue. And it's so funny because a lot of times, like, I don't even know that I'm doing this, but we're sitting on the couch and I'm like literally almost sitting on top of him. And he's like, can you give me a little space?
and well, it's just like sometimes we'll be like working on our laptops and like my elbow's stuck in here and I'm like, girl, like you're right here. You want to chill out a little bit or something like that. But no, for her, it's really important that like we always sit on the same couch. Like whenever we eat dinner, we're very close to each other. Whenever we're out, we're constantly trying to like give each other hugs or make sure that we know that we're there. And sensing that physical presence is super important. And like I said, we have to have grace when people tell us how they would like their love language communicated, and we need to be very like, and I keep using this word intentional, but we need to be intentional about living that out. If someone says, hey, you know, I don't just want physical touch when there's going to be intimacy, I want physical touch in these different situations, it's important that I, as the husband in this situation, I'm like, okay, like I'm going to be very intentional about that. Like I am not as touchy as Jasmine is, but like I will go out of my way to make sure that I'm holding her or holding her hand or doing things like that. And that kind of brings us to our, you know, the second half of this discussion is like, what are the ways, we're going to go over some hot tips of how you can communicate each one of these love languages to another person.
But, you know, first with that, like you have to figure out like what are the love languages that you thrive on. Yeah. Like make sure you number like what's your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like make sure you label it.
If you haven't taken the love languages test, I encourage you. It's free. I'm pretty sure you can go online and take that test and maybe learn a little bit about yourself. Maybe you have a love language, or when you answer these questions, you like things that you hadn't put in words before. And so now once you know that, it's a lot easier to communicate.
But not only figure that out for yourself, but also with your friends, with your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your wife, your husband or your wife, your kids or your brother or your sister. Like, how do they, I've learned this, and it's really impacted my life of like, okay, not only do you know your love languages, but what are the other people that are really close to you? What are their love languages? And are you giving them the love that they receive, or like, are you just giving them how you receive it? You know, and people are going to notice that. Like, if you are only giving the way that you receive love or like to receive love, like they're probably not going to be close with you, because you're like, okay, you're just like, if
you're not a physical touch person and Jazz only wants to give physical touch, it's going to make it super awkward.
Yeah,
and you're going to create a barrier.
Girl, get away from me.
But it also, it kind of can allude to like, okay, if you aren't intentional about learning other people's love languages and communicating that way, it almost makes them feel like you don't actually care. Right.
Also, I want to kind of put this in there too. Like, yes, my love language is touch, but I'm not going to go to every man and like touch them or the way that I am with Joshua. You know, it's just like there's boundaries in everything that you do. Yeah. So I just wanted to give you that little thing.
That's a great caveat. That's a great caveat. Yeah. Don't be just touching everybody like that. I'm like, excuse me, watch yourself. But like, let's dive into how can you communicate each of these love languages. These are just going to be some quick tips, some things that you can write down, or some things that maybe you haven't thought about before. But if you're giving words of affirmation, it's important that you encourage, that you affirm, that you appreciate. You let them know, whether it's through a text message, whether it's through a voicemail, a phone call, in person. Hey, I appreciate you. Hey, I noticed that you did this. I saw that when you were talking to this person, that they just really were blessed by what you said. I think it's awesome that you have that. Actively listening to them, even like when you're hearing what they have to say and then giving them feedback, letting them know that you listen, that you're affirming them and what they've done.
Yeah.
I think that's super important. Those are some hot tips for words of affirmation that really will help you out.
And the next one we can do is quality time. So make sure when you are with the person giving them quality time, you're giving them your undivided attention. Like their conversations are not interrupted by a phone call or text messages or notifications from your phone. Like you can go ahead, put your phone face down, make sure you're giving them your full undivided attention. And that's very, very important with that. And like I said, the actions you can take is if you're on a lunch or a coffee date with them, put your phone face down. Don't let
or
that
put
be
them away. Don't even have them,
don't let that be a distraction. Make personal memories, go for walks, do small things with that person. Weekend trips are extremely loved by these people. Like, who doesn't love to travel? I mean, there might be some people who don't like to travel, but we're
big travelers. We like going to see places together.
To travel.
Love it.
Even if it's the smallest thing, like, okay, let's go to Waco or let's go to Houston, let's do something. Or even if it's big things, like we love it all.
Yeah. And it's like, again, these are actions and these are steps that you can take to communicate this love. Acts of service, using language like, hey, I'll help, I'll take care of that.
Yeah.
Letting her know, like, sometimes Jazz will be like, hey, I'm stressed about this, and this. I'm like, you know what, babe, I can help with this. And that was like, oh, wow, that's amazing that you offer that help. And sometimes, again, to things we talked about, like dishes and cleaning up the house, I know she wants those things done. I don't need her to tell me that she wants those things done. I know that's something that she's thinking about. So if I can actively be like, you know what, I'm going to go take care of some of those things off her plate. And even for me, like, I'm not going to pretend I don't like when she does it for me as well. Like, I love when she's like, hey, I cleaned the house, or hey, I made dinner tonight. Hey, this is already done. Like, this is making your life easier. But it's super important that, make the extra effort. Like, you could not do it and it'd probably be, like, okay, it'll get done eventually, but making that extra effort lets them know that you care enough to sacrifice some of your time to make their life easier.
Those actions never go unnoticed.
Yeah, no. And like we talked about earlier, when you do see those actions and you notice someone's going out of their way, if they are a words of affirmation person, make sure that you let them know, hey, I see that your actions are going out of your way. If they're an active service person, make sure that it's not like a one-way relationship where they always do something for you and you're like, oh, well, I'm just going to take it all in and never help out. Maybe it's supposed to be, a two-way relationship. You want to both be doing these things. You want to both be active about finding each other's love languages and helping out.
Not only are you receiving, but you're giving as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next one is receiving gifts. Like I said, it's big to make your spouse or your friend or whoever it is a priority and make sure that you're communicating that. Like I said, it doesn't have to be extravagant gift. It doesn't have to be the most expensive thing, but if it fits and goes in line with what they like and what their personality is and what they love at the moment. Like, it was really big for, I think the coolest thing that I got was like tickets to a Taylor Swift concert. I thought that was the coolest thing ever because I'm like, wow, not only is the person like spending money on me, but they know that I loved Taylor Swift.
And I think it's like small actions. Like, sometimes if I see flowers, I'm like, Jazz would like these flowers. Let me go get something. Sometimes Jazz will see things that I like, and she'll be like, oh, Josh would really like this shirt, or he would really like this hat. Let me get that for him. And it's super important that we take that time. Here's, again, I have a lot of caveats for these guys here, but like major holidays and birthdays, you need to make sure you're getting gifts for those. Like, make sure, or that you're doing something. You don't have to necessarily get a gift, but make sure that you're intentional about those times. But don't let that be the only time that you're, if someone is a gifts person, maybe, throughout the week, randomly you're at a flower shop. You're like, I'm going to pick up this flower, or you know what? I'm just going to write them a note real quick, or I'm going to make them something. I'm going to do something like that is showing that I'm going out of my way. So, receiving gifts is a really easy way, but like, again, be thoughtful, be intentional about the gifts you're getting them. Don't just get them a gift to keep them happy, but be like, hey, I want to show that I love you. And so I'm going to get you something that you'll really like.
Like, I feel for the person who's like giving the gift, it's like an action of way you can express how they what they mean to you. And it's really cool that you get that ability to do that.
Also, like on the gifting is when you do receive a gift, it's important that you like are thankful as well. Like, no one likes to give gifts to someone that doesn't is not thankful or is like,
appreciative.
okay, yeah, you should be getting that for me. It's like, okay, well, again, the two-way thing here is when someone gets you a gift, acknowledge that, hey, wow, that's awesome that you got me the gift. Like, thank you so much. And again, you could also be getting gifts for them. You guys can exchange gifts. You guys can do so many different things, but make sure that all of these love languages are a little bit connected, that we're very intentional about putting them all out.
Yeah. And the next one is physical touch. It's a nonverbal communication through love, through body language and touch. And what that can be is like literally just a hug, holding hands, kissing each other, not in public. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
not,
PDA, chill on the PDA.
Not everyone likes PDA.
Chill on the PDA, okay?
But also just like, it's just making that a priority. Like Joshua knows that's my number one. So he is going to be considerate of like, oh, we're out in public. Let me just grab her hand in like random moments. And like, honestly, that makes me so happy. Like we could literally be at a grocery store and just walk. Like I'm thinking of stuff. Like I'm the kind of person of like, okay, I'm making a list in my head of what do we need to do? It's like going to be super quick because we need to do something else. And it's like his holding my hand is like, okay, let's just calm down. Let's just make this a moment and have time, like have fun at this time. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So like kind of just wrapping up here, we're going to go, if you haven't written these down yet, quality time, words of affirmation, gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. Those are the 5 love languages. And I want to stress, we can definitely use these gifts to our advantage when we're trying to steward our friendships, our love interest. If you haven't taken the quiz, we recommend that you do that. Yeah. Find out what your love languages are, but also encourage your friends to do that. Encourage your family to do that. Find out what each other's love languages are. And maybe you already know, and that's great. Make sure you're intentional about living that out. Make sure that you're communicating what yours are. If you notice that, hey, you know what, I'm not receiving this, or I'm not seeing that type of affirmation that I need. Like sometimes I would have talked to Jazz and been like, hey, like when you don't say anything, it makes me feel like you don't notice anything. Like if it goes for weeks or for months or something like that where I haven't got a word of affirmation, like it doesn't happen anymore. But like early on, there's sometimes where she was like, okay, I'm not just gonna like throw out random compliments. But like for me, I was like, okay, so you're not affirming at all. And for me, again, like we had the conversation about physical touch. She's like, I don't want that to always mean intimacy. I want that just to mean cute little things. It's super important that we're communicating that. And this is a life journey, right? Sometimes your what brings you love can change over time, right? Like you're like,
I said, if I was back in college or whatever, words of affirmation was literally number 5 on my list. But now I can literally say that's my number 2. It went straight from 5 to 2. And like we talked about this before, there's tiny parts of these things that we're going to like. Like I'm going to like words of affirmation. I like quality time. I like acts of service. I like receiving gifts. I love physical touch, but some things are just going to resonate more with us and give us more life than others.
Yeah. So take these principles that we've talked about and apply them to your life and see how that changes how you feel loved, how you receive love, and how you give love. It's going to be so cool to see that. And it's been super awesome in our relationship in these 2 years of marriage, that we've just learned so much by really being intentional with all of these things. So again, we want to thank you guys so much for listening to Real Talk with J&J. We would love to hear from you. If you have questions, if you would like to comment, like, subscribe, let us know how you feel, leave reviews. Like, we want to hear from you guys. We're so honored to be able to talk to you guys about these things. And thank you for everyone for listening. It's been super cool.
Thank you guys. We'll see you next time.